In the silent, sterile halls of the Galactic Progenitor Academy, knowledge was currency and safety was doctrine. The air itself, filtered and recycled through 1,000 crystalline lattices, hummed with a placid, unyielding tranquility. Here in the heart of the Sidonian sector, the children of a dozen star systems learned the universe not as it was, but as it ought to be, a grand, orderly equation where all the dangerous variables had long been solved. The professor, a being of light and logic named Xyler, gestured with a slender, three-jointed appendage towards the holographic display dominating the front of the amphitheater. On it, a creature from a forgotten world frolicked in a field of green. "Observe, initiates," Xyler's voice resonated, a series of soft, melodic chimes. "The Terran Ovis Ares, a creature of profound docility, its primary defense mechanism is communal clustering. It poses no threat. It is, in the old Terran parlance, harmless." The image shifted. A vibrant, winged insect, a butterfly, flitted from flower to flower. The Terran Rhopalosra, its gossamer wings are a study in fragile beauty. It drinks nectar. It is harmless. Image after image, the lesson was the same. A lumbering bovine, a colorful tree frog, a small rodent. Earth, the backwater planet in the Sol system, was presented as a quaint, beautiful, but ultimately toothless nursery. A galactic nature preserve whose inhabitants were living art, beautiful in their simplicity and utter lack of genuine threat. This was the accepted truth. This was the curriculum. And in the back of the class, the lone human exchange student, Kai, felt a cold, hard knot tighten in his gut. They thought his home was a garden. They had no idea it was a jungle. They admired the beauty of the rose, but had never been taught about the thorns. They were about to receive a lesson that wasn't on the syllabus. A lesson not of sterile facts and figures, but of blood, bone, and will. This is the story of how a galaxy that had forgotten the meaning of the word, danger, was forced to relearn it. This is the story of the day a human taught them the brutal, beautiful, terrifying truth of what a pitbull is. The problem with living in a gilded cage is that you forget the existence of predators. The Lumen and the half-dozen other races in the Federation had achieved what they called ascended peace. They had engineered conflict out of their societies. Disagreements were settled by logic tribunals. Physical confrontation was seen as a primitive, vulgar relic of a bygone era. Their bodies had followed suit. They were slender, graceful, built for thought and delicate manipulation, not for struggle. And so their study of xenobiology was fundamentally flawed. It was the study of an art critic examining a battle axe. They could appreciate its form, its composition, its historical context, but they had absolutely no visceral understanding of what it was for. They would watch archival footage of a cheetah running down a gazelle and call it kinetic poetry. They saw the life-or-death struggle for survival, the tearing of flesh and the desperate flight for life, as a tragic but beautiful ballet. They missed the entire point. They saw the what, but they could not comprehend the why. The why was survival. It was the single, non-negotiable law of Earth, a law written in tooth and claw, in venom and desperation. A law that shaped every living thing on the planet, including the quiet humans sitting in their classroom. Kai wasn't a product of their sterile starships and placid biodomes. He was a product of Earth. He had felt the searing heat of a sun that wasn't filtered through an atmospheric shield. He had felt the biting cold of a winter that wasn't temperature-controlled. He had seen a hawk snatch a rabbit from a field and understood it wasn't poetry. It was lunch. He had felt fear, real fear, the kind that floods your veins with adrenaline and sharpens your senses to a razor's edge. It was a sensation entirely alien to his classmates. They had anxiety about their test scores. They had no concept of the primal, clarifying terror of a true threat. For weeks he had sat in silence, listening to Professor Zeiler's well-meaning but dangerously naive lectures. He saw how they were building a galactic worldview on a foundation of comforting lies. They were preparing their next generation of leaders, diplomats, and scientists with a fatal blind spot. They did not understand the nature of a creature that has to fight to exist. And by extension, they did not and could not understand humanity. They saw humans as anomalies, a species that had reached for the stars, yet still carried the ghost of the jungle in its DNA. They were fascinated by human art, music, and philosophy, but deeply unsettled by human history. A history soaked in conflict, struggle, and conquest. They saw it as a flaw, a primitive vestige to be overcome. Kai knew it was the source of their greatest strength. It was the furnace that had forged their resilience, their adaptability, and their unbreakable will. The breaking point came during a lesson on symbiotic evolution. Professor Zeiler was explaining how species on other worlds had evolved to be mutually beneficial, creating harmonious ecosystems. He then used Earth as a counterexample, showing a documentary of a pack of African wild dogs. "Notice the disorganized chaos," Zeiler chimed. "While there is a form of cooperation, it is driven by base impulse. It is inefficient, violent. There is no higher harmony here, only a shared, frantic hunger." Kai couldn't stay silent any longer. He stood up. The entire class turned to look at him, their various eyes, faceted, glowing, liquid black, widening in surprise. Students did not interrupt the progenitors. "You're wrong, Professor." Kai's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room's placid hum like a shard of glass. Zeiler tilted his head. "Elucidate, Student Kai." "You see chaos, I see a brotherhood, you see frantic hunger, I see a shared purpose so strong they will die for each other to achieve it. You see inefficiency. I see a system honed by 1,000,000 years of failure and success. You see violence. I see the price of survival. You're teaching them the anatomy of a storm, but you're not teaching them the power of the lightning." A hush fell over the amphitheater. No one had ever contradicted a progenitor so directly. Kai pressed on. "Your curriculum is dangerous. It teaches that the universe is safe, that all creatures of high intelligence evolve beyond what you call base impulses. You are teaching them to be sheep in a universe that still has wolves, and you've mislabeled the wolves as just another form of sheep." Professor Zeiler, to his credit, was not offended. He was intrigued. The Lumen valued new data above all else. "Your perspective is novel. You believe our understanding of Terran biology is incomplete." "It's not incomplete," Kai said, his gaze sweeping over the curious faces of his classmates. "It's a fantasy, and I would like permission to correct it." And so it was arranged. Kai was granted use of the Academy's most advanced teaching tool, the Omnisphere. It was a room that could generate photorealistic, multisensory holographic environments, the perfect place to give a lesson that couldn't be taught with words alone. The title of his guest lecture was posted on the class schedule, "A Deconstruction of Harmlessness, a Terran Case Study." The entire xenobiology department, including a dozen progenitors, attended. They had no idea their gilded cage was about to be rattled to its foundations. Kai stood in the center of the vast, white, empty omnisphere. The audience, seated in tiered rows, watched him with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. They were here to be entertained by the primitive human's quaint perspective. "Welcome," Kai began, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "For weeks you have studied Earth's fauna. You have learned their Latin names, their dietary needs, and their mating rituals. You have learned everything about them except what matters most. You have learned what they are, but not why they are." He gestured to the empty space around him. "The universe is not a library, it is a forge, and life on my world has been shaped by its hammer and its fire for eons. What you call violence and chaos are the tools of its creation. Today, we are not going to study a species. We are going to study a concept embodied by a single, misunderstood creature. A creature bred by humans for humans. A creature that is a living paradox, one that your philosophy has no room for. We are going to study the Canis lupus familiaris, variant, American Pit Bull Terrier. The name meant nothing to them. On the master display, a technical schematic appeared, but it was the creature's informal name that Kai spoke next that hung in the air. You might know it by a more common and more feared name, the Pitbull. With a soft hum, the omnisphere came to life. The white walls dissolved into a sun-drenched suburban backyard. Green grass, a white picket fence, children's toys scattered about. And in the center of the yard, a muscular, brindle-coated dog was lying in the sun, its tail thumping rhythmically against the ground. A small human child, no older than 5, was sitting beside it, her hands buried in its thick neck. The alien audience relaxed. A murmur of soft chimes and clicks rippled through the stands. The creature was charming. Its eyes were soft, its posture relaxed. It occasionally licked the child's face, eliciting a fit of giggles. "This is Maya," Kai's voice explained. "And the child's name is Lily. Observe, is this creature dangerous? Is it a threat?" Professor Zeiler spoke for the group. "It appears to be in a state of placid subservience, a classic dominant-submissive bond, typical of a domesticated species." "Exactly," Kai said. "You see what you expect to see, you see Harmless." This is the first and most critical part of the lesson. We will call it the illusion of provocation. Kai continued, his voice hardening slightly. "Your philosophy of conflict is transactional. Threat requires provocation. An insult is met with a rebuttal. An act of aggression is met with a calculated, equal response. You believe that danger announces itself, that it follows a set of logical rules. That is a fantasy that will get you killed." He made a gesture with his hand. The simulation shifted. A new figure appeared at the edge of the holographic yard, a tall, menacing man in dark clothing. His posture was aggressive, his face twisted in a snarl. It was just a simulation, but the programmed intent was palpable. The man began to walk towards the child, Lily. The dog, Maya, hadn't moved a muscle. She was still lying on the grass, but everything about her had changed. Her head was up. Her tail had stopped thumping. The soft eyes were now hard, fixed, and unblinking. A low, almost inaudible rumble started in her chest. "Observe," Kai commanded. "The man has not touched the dog. He has not spoken to the dog. He has not even looked at the dog. By your transactional logic, the dog has not been provoked. So why has it prepared for violence?" The audience was silent. "Because the Pitbull's loyalty is not transactional. It is absolute," Kai explained. "The threat is not to itself, but to what it loves. The concept of self has become secondary to the concept of protector. This is a level of loyalty your logic models cannot compute. It is the protective instinct of a parent, the selfless courage of a soldier. It is the understanding that some things are more important than your own survival. True danger doesn't begin when you are attacked. It begins when what you are sworn to protect is threatened. That is the first truth of the Pitbull. It is a truth my people, humans, understand in our very bones." The simulated man took another step towards the child. He raised his voice, shouting aggressively. Now the dog stood up, not with a panicked leap, but with a slow, deliberate motion. Every muscle in its body was coiled, a spring of potential energy. The low rumble in its chest grew into a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through the floor of the omnisphere. Its teeth were now bared. It didn't bark. It didn't posture wildly. It was a picture of controlled, focused menace. It placed itself directly between the man and the child, a living shield. And this, Kai's voice dropped, becoming grave, brings us to the second lesson. We will call it the economy of violence. You have been taught that violence is chaotic, a failing of intellect. You believe a physical conflict is a messy, unpredictable affair. Once again, you are wrong. The man in the simulation lunged, not for the dog, but for the child. The explosion of motion was so fast, so brutally efficient that many in the audience flinched. The dog did not attack the man's flailing arms or legs. It did not snap wildly. It launched itself forward with a singular, calculated purpose. It bypassed all peripheral targets, and its jaws locked onto the man's arm, the primary point of threat. The simulation froze at the moment of impact. Kai walked into the hologram, pointing at the dog's form. "Look closely," he urged the stunned aliens. "This is not rage. This is an application of force. There is no wasted energy. The attack is precise, targeted, and absolute. The goal is not to injure, it is to stop the threat. Completely. This is the principle of overwhelming force applied with maximum efficiency." He gestured to the dog's powerful jaws, frozen in the simulation. This creature was bred for generations for a trait humans call gameness. It is a word you do not have in your language. It means the refusal to quit, no matter the pain, no matter the odds. It is the spirit of the defender who will not break. When it commits, its commitment is total. It will not be deterred by pain or fear. It will hold on until the threat is gone or until it is destroyed. There is no retreat. There is no negotiation. Kai turned to face the audience directly. Your civilization's strategy is to de-escalate, to retreat at the first sign of trouble. You believe this is wisdom. On Earth, we know that sometimes de-escalation is simply an invitation for a greater attack. Sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to become something more ferocious than they are. The Pitbull does not engage in a debate. It ends the argument. That is the economy of violence. It is brutal, it is terrifying, but in the face of true evil, it is the only language that is understood. He unfroze the simulation. The holographic man screamed, his attack completely neutralized. The dog held its grip, its body a taut anchor of defiance, its eyes never leaving the threat. The scene was violent, raw, and deeply unsettling to the progenitors. It flew in the face of every principle they held dear. And then Kai delivered the final and most profound part of the lesson. With a command, the holographic man dissolved into pixels and vanished. The threat was gone. Instantly, the dog let go. The creature that a second before had been a vessel of terrifying violence immediately shook its entire body as if shedding a heavy coat. It turned, trotted back to the crying child, and began to gently lick the tears from her face. Its tail began to wag, slowly at first, then with joyful abandon. The deep growl was replaced by a soft, comforting whine. It nudged its head under the child's arm, pressing its body against hers in a gesture of pure comfort and affection. The whiplash of this transformation stunned the audience into absolute silence. It was this moment, more than the violence, that shattered their understanding. Their universe was binary. Things were either safe or dangerous, harmless or a threat. A weapon could not suddenly become a comfort blanket. "This," Kai said, his voice now soft, "is the final and most important truth. We will call it the paradox of power and gentleness." He stood next to the holographic dog and child, who were now huddled together in a portrait of pure love and trust. You believe that to be safe, you must be weak. You believe power is inherently corrupting and dangerous. You think that to be harmless, one must have no teeth. Earth teaches a different lesson, a harder lesson. True harmlessness is not the absence of power. It is having immense power and the wisdom and restraint to use it only when necessary. It is having teeth and choosing to offer a gentle lick instead. This creature, he gestured to the dog, is a living weapon forged for combat, but its ferocity is not its default state. Its default state is love. Its default state is loyalty. Its default state is gentleness. The violence is a tool, a switch that is flipped by a threat to what it loves. When the threat is gone, the switch is flipped back. The capacity for brutal violence and the capacity for profound gentleness exist within the same body at the same time. One does not cancel out the other. In fact, they give each other meaning. The gentleness is more precious because you know of the power it holds in reserve. The power is more awesome because you know it is governed by love. Kai looked up at Professor Zeiler, whose glowing form seemed to have dimmed slightly, as if in shock. This is the nature of the Pitbull, and this, Kai said, his voice resonating with quiet pride, is the nature of humanity. We are not the quaint, harmless gardeners you thought we were. We are the children of a world of pitbulls. We carry the same paradox within us. We have built cathedrals and we have built atom bombs. We have written poetry and we have written codes of war. We can be the most gentle of caretakers and the most terrifying of warriors. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness. Do not mistake our diplomacy for an inability to fight. We are the guardians who look like monsters to those who have never seen a true monster before. We are the ones who understand that the only way to keep the flock safe is to be willing to become the wolf. The omnisphere dissolved, leaving Kai alone again in the center of the white room. The silence was absolute. It was not the silence of polite consideration. It was the silence of a worldview being systematically dismantled. The progenitors, the lumen, the children of a dozen safe and sterile worlds, had just looked into the heart of a reality they had spent millennia trying to forget. They had seen the terrifying, beautiful, paradoxical truth of a world called Earth, all encapsulated in the spirit of a single dog. Professor Zeiler was the first to find his voice. The melodic chimes were gone, replaced by a tone of sober revelation. Student Kai, your case study has revealed a significant deficiency in our curriculum and in our philosophy. He looked at his fellow progenitors. We have been teaching the galaxy how to build a perfect cage. It seems we have forgotten why cages are built in the first place. The lesson of the Pitbull rippled out from the Academy. The recordings were studied across the Federation. It fundamentally altered the galaxy's perception of humanity. They were no longer seen as chaotic primitives. They were recontextualized. They were the species that had never had the luxury of forgetting. They were the ones who still remembered how to stand their ground. Their history of conflict was no longer a sign of a flaw, but evidence of their resilience. They were the only ones who knew in their bones that peace is not a passive state. It is an active one. It must be guarded. It must be protected. And sometimes its protector must have very, very sharp teeth. The universe is not safe. It never has been. You have been taught a lie. You have been taught to be docile, to de-escalate, to avoid conflict, to believe that your good intentions are a shield against a world that has none. You have been taught to file down your teeth and call it enlightenment. This story is your wake-up call. The Pitbull is not just a dog. It is a metaphor for the strength that lies dormant within you, your capacity for fierce loyalty, your unbreakable will. Your instinct to protect what you love, not with negotiation, but with absolute commitment. The world will tell you that this part of you is dangerous, that it's primitive, that it's something to be ashamed of. It is a lie told by the comfortable to keep the strong in check. Your power is not a flaw. Your ferocity, when controlled by love and purpose, is your greatest asset. It is the very thing that will allow you to defend your family, your values, your dreams from a world that will try to tear them down. Stop mistaking weakness for goodness. Stop seeing power as a corrupting force. True power is the ability to be a warrior in the garden. It is the paradox of being able to comfort a crying child with the same hands that can fend off a wolf. So ask yourself, what is your purpose? Who and what are you sworn to protect? Your family, your future, your own soul, find it. And then unleash the pitbull inside you. Not the snarling, uncontrolled beast the world fears, but the loyal, courageous, and utterly committed guardian. Be gentle by default, but be ready always to become the most terrifying thing someone has ever seen when what you love is threatened. That is the economy of violence. That is the paradox of power. And that is the brutal, beautiful truth of what it takes to not just survive, but to truly live. Don't be harmless, be a protector.